The genius trick. Schopenhauer on pretending to be stupid. What if I told you that one of the most profound strategies for navigating a world full of egos, manipulation, and hidden power dynamics is something so subtle, so counterintuitive, that most people dismiss it as weakness? What if true genius, real, penetrating, world-shaping intelligence sometimes hides behind a blank stare, a gentle nod, or even a deliberate pause that makes others think you didn't understand? This isn't about deception in the malicious sense. It's about survival. It's about leverage. And Schopenhauer, the brooding German philosopher of pessimism and will, understood this better than almost anyone. He didn't just write about the nature of reality or the suffering inherent in desire. He also studied human behavior like a chess master. And he discovered a strange, paradoxical truth. Pretending to be stupid can be a genius move. Now let's be clear. Schopenhauer didn't advocate for ignorance. In fact, he believed wisdom was one of the few treasures worth pursuing in a world filled with illusion and pain. But he also understood something that most intellectuals forget: being visibly intelligent, constantly proving your brilliance, or always correcting others, it doesn't win you allies. It wins you enemies. It provokes resentment. It traitens egos. And when you threaten someone's ego, their first instinct isn't gratitude, it's defense, or worse, attack. So what do you do when you're smarter than the room, but you can't afford to alienate it? You pretend you're not. That, Schopenhauer believed, is the genius trick. We live in a society that rewards visibility, performance, and the loudest voice in the room. But history and philosophy tell a different story. The people who endure, the ones who quietly bend the world to their will, often do so from the shadows, not because they're weak, but because they're strategic. And that's the first layer of this idea. Power doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like letting someone else feel superior, even when you know they aren't. Sometimes it looks like smiling while someone underestimates you because their arrogance becomes your leverage. Schopenhauer's insight wasn't just about outwitting others, it was about understanding human nature at its most raw. He saw through the polished surfaces of society, into the primal drives underneath. And what he found was this: most people are not driven by truth or logic, they're driven by vanity. They need to feel right. They need to feel superior. They need to feel like they're the smartest person in the room. And if you threaten that feeling, you've made an enemy whether you meant to or not.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
So what's the alternative? You give them the illusion of victory. You let them believe they're leading while you're actually steering. You let them think they've taught you something while you've already anticipated their next move. This isn't submission. It's camouflage. It's the art of moving through a dangerous world without drawing fire. And Schopenhauer, who had no illusions about human kindness, saw this as essential wisdom. Now pause and ask yourself something uncomfortable. How often have you revealed too much, too soon? How often have you corrected someone just to prove you were right? How often have you shown your intelligence in a way that made others recoil instead of respect you? And what did it cost you? A relationship, an opportunity, a moment of peace. Most of us think the smartest people are the ones who speak the most, but sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one who says the least. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, about Schopenhauer sitting silently through a dinner party while a pompous guest boasted about philosophy. At the end, the guest turned to him and said, "You seem rather quiet. Do you study philosophy?" Schopenhauer reportedly smiled and replied, "I dabble. That's the trick. Not denial. Not false humility, but just enough distance to let the other person stay comfortable in their illusion while you hold the real understanding." But this strategy isn't just about manipulating others. It's also about discipline. When you pretend to be stupid, you're not lying. You're exercising restraint. You're resisting the urge to dominate, to display, to gratify your own ego. And that self-restraint, Schopenhauer believed, is the foundation of true wisdom. Because the moment your actions are driven by a need to prove something, you're no longer acting from strength. You're reacting from insecurity. Think about that. How many of your smartest moments were actually just ego in disguise? How often have you wanted to be understood, admired, or validated when what you really needed was to stay silent, observe, and wait? The genius trick isn't about pretending forever. It's about timing. It's about knowing when to reveal what you know and when to let others underestimate you. Because when people underestimate you, they reveal themselves. They open up. They expose their assumptions, their weaknesses, their blind spots. And that's where your true advantage lies, not in being seen, but in seeing. So the next time you're in a room full of people competing to sound smart, ask yourself this: what would Schopenhauer do? Would he rush to speak? Or would he lean back, observe, and let the illusion play out? Because in a world obsessed with appearing intelligent, maybe the real power lies in pretending not to care if anyone notices. The hidden weapon why being underestimated is the ultimate power. There's something incredibly liberating about being underestimated. Most people spend their lives trying to be seen, fighting for recognition, craving acknowledgement, posting, performing, proving. But what if the real secret to power is the exact opposite? What if disappearing in plain sight is not a weakness, but a strategic advantage? Schopenhauer understood that when people assume you're simple, slow, or unthreatening, they drop their guard. And in that moment when they stop watching you closely, you gain something priceless: freedom of movement. Let's be honest, being underestimated can sting. It can feel like an insult, like invisibility, like erasure. And our first instinct is usually to push back, to say, "No, I'm smarter than you think. Watch me." But that reaction gives away the game. It tells the world, "I care what you think. I need you to validate me." And that's where Schopenhauer's trick loses its power. Because the moment you try to correct someone's perception, you're no longer in control of the frame they are. You've entered their battlefield and now you're playing by their rules. But what if you didn't correct them? What if you let them let them think they've got you figured out? Let them assume they're 10 steps ahead while you're quietly building, learning, watching. That's not surrender. That's camouflage. In a world run by egos, is a weapon more powerful than intellect, more dangerous than ambition, and more enduring than charisma. Because it allows you to act without resistance, to gather information, to prepare your move. While everyone else is playing checkers, you're playing chess with a blank expression and a disarming smile. There's a reason why the most dangerous animal is often the one that looks least threatening. It's nature's most ancient strategy. Conceal strength until it's too late for anyone to stop you. That's what makes underestimation so powerful. When no one expects you to win, you can change the rules of the game before they even realize you're playing. And Schopenhauer, who saw through the performative layers of society, knew that appearances are often more important than reality because people act on appearances. If they see you as harmless, they will treat you as such. And that's your opening. Think about your own life. When have you been underestimated? Maybe it was at work where someone assumed you weren't sharp enough to lead, or in a relationship where someone mistook your kindness for naivety, or in school where a teacher overlooked your potential. At the time, it probably felt like rejection. But looking back, if you had leaned into that misperception instead of fighting it, would it have given you more room to operate, more time to observe, more power to act on your own terms? This is the core of Schopenhauer's insight. Visibility creates vulnerability. The more people expect from you, the more they watch. The more they watch, the more they interfere. But when they write you off, they leave you alone. And when you're left alone, you can build in silence, which is how real power is forged. In a world addicted to attention, being underestimated is the last form of freedom. You're not burdened by the weight of expectation. You're not trapped in someone else's vision of who you're supposed to be. You're free to explore, to learn, to surprise. And when the moment comes to reveal who you really are, it doesn't just catch people off guard, it rewrites their entire understanding of you. But here's the twist, it's not about revenge. It's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about timing. When you act from ego, you reveal too soon. When you act from wisdom, you wait. You let the world sleep on you, not because you're weak, but because you're waiting for the right moment to wake them up. Ask yourself this: what could you accomplish if no one saw you coming? What could you create if you stopped explaining and started executing? What would change if you stopped trying to be seen and started using your invisibility as a tool? The underestimated are not the overlooked, they are the overlookers. They are the ones who see everything while being seen as nothing. And that vantage point, that quiet view from the edge, that's where empires are born. The strategic silence, how Schopenhauer turned quiet into a weapon. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forces in the human experience. To the untrained mind, it looks like absence, like weakness, like a lack of something: words, opinions, courage. But to the philosopher, the strategist, the visionary, silence is not an absence. It's a presence. It's not a void. It's a vessel. And Schopenhauer, with his grim but brilliant view of human nature, understood silence not just as a passive state, but as an active weapon, one that, when wielded with discipline, creates advantage, dominance, and mystery all at once. Consider this: when you speak, you reveal. You give the world your coordinates, your beliefs, your fears, your knowledge, your insecurities. Every word is a window into your mind. And while that can be powerful, it also makes you traceable, prédictable, attackable. But when you're silent, you become unreadable. You create space. And in that space, other people begin to project. They start filling in the blanks with their own assumptions, their own biases, their own fears. And often they reveal more about themselves than you ever could by speaking. That's the secret Schopenhauer tapped into. Silence isn't just about withholding speech, it's about gaining information. It's about letting others expose themselves while you remain protected. In his work, he often pointed out that most people speak not to communicate truth, but to assert dominance, to perform intelligence, to soothe their own vanity. So why interrupt that process? Why compete in a game that feeds the very illusions you're trying to escape? Instead, Schopenhauer invites us to a different game entirely, a game where silence is not awkward but intentional, where the pause is more powerful than the punchline, where the refusal to answer is itself an answer. Because in that refusal, you maintain control over what people know and, more importantly, what they think they know. Let's apply this to real life. Think about the last time someone tried to challenge you, provoke you, bait you into a reaction. Maybe it was a coworker who made a sarcastic comment, a friend who tested your patience, a stranger online who pressed your buttons. What did you do? Did you rush to defend yourself? To correct them? To prove them wrong? That's what most of us do. It feels like the noble thing. But Schopenhauer would say, every time you react impulsively, you've already lost. Not because you're wrong, but because you've allowed someone else to dictate your energy. Now flip the script. Imagine meeting that same challenge with silence. Not the silence of submission, but the silence of containment. The silence of someone who doesn't need to win the moment because they're playing for something bigger. That kind of silence isn't absence, it's presence. It says, I see you, but I won't let you control me. It says, I know what you're trying to do, and I refuse to participate. And that refusal, that calm detachment, it's devastating to the person who wanted power over you. Here's another layer. Silence also creates mystery, and mystery is magnetic. When people don't know what you're thinking, they lean in, they wonder, they speculate, and in their speculation, they elevate you. Because the unknown is always more powerful than the known. Schopenhauer, who believed that much of life is driven by illusions and projections, knew that the less you reveal, the more power you hold, not by manipulation, but by discipline. This is why the most respected people in any room are often the quietest. Not because they've has nothing to say, but because they've trained themselves to wait, to listen, to choose their moment. And when they finally speak, everyone listens not just because of what they say, but because of how rarely they say it. So ask yourself, how often do you speak just to fill the silence? How often do you give away your inner world to people who haven't earned access? How much of your power have you traded for the comfort of being understood? Schopenhauer believed that in a noisy world, silence is a form of strength. It is the shield that protects the mind from the chaos of other people's expectations. It is the quiet chamber where wisdom is refined. And if you can master it not as a performance, but as a philosophy, you become ungovernable. The world will always try to provoke you, to pull you into battles that don't matter, to bait you into wasting your energy on noise. But the wise don't fight every fight. They don't respond to every challenge. They don't rush to be heard. They conserve their energy. Observe the field and wait for the moment when one word delivered in absolute silence changes everything. The final move, playing dumb to reveal the truth at the heart of Schopenhauer's genius trick, lies a final maneuver, one so subtle, so counterintuitive that it almost feels like betrayal to our modern obsession with being right, being respected, being seen as competent at all times. But here it is. Play dumb not to deceive others, but to reveal them. This is not about lying, nor is it about suppressing your intelligence. It's about leveraging perception to expose the deeper truths that only surface when people believe they're unobserved, unchallenged, and alone in their superiority. When you act intelligent, people become guarded. They craft their language carefully. They posture. They hide their vulnerabilities. But when you appear naive, they relax. They speak openly. They underestimate your ability to read subtext, to catch inconsistencies, to track motives. And suddenly you see everything. Their mask comes off, not because you ripped it away, but because they felt safe enough to let it slide. The person who thinks they're smarter than you will always reveal more than they intend. That's the trap. And it only works if you're patient enough to pretend. Schopenhauer knew this, not just as a philosopher, but as a keen observer of human psychology. He understood that truth is rarely given freely. It must be drawn out, often indirectly. And one of the most effective ways to draw it out is to let others believe they are leading the conversation, that they are superior, that you're just trying to keep up. In that space, their ego fills the void, and in doing so, it exposes their real intentions, beliefs, and weaknesses. Now ask yourself, what's more powerful, confronting someone with the truth they'll instinctively reject, or allowing them to reveal it themselves without realizing they're doing it? The first creates resistance. The second creates clarity. And that clarity is only possible when you relinquish the need to be recognized as the smartest person in the room. This tactic has real-world implications far beyond philosophical debate. In business negotiations, the person who appears uninformed often gets the most honest offer. In relationships, the one who asks simple questions can uncover layers of emotional truth that a direct confrontation would never reach. Even in everyday life, the person who listens more than they talk, who appears curious rather than authoritative, gathers more information, makes better decisions, and avoids unnecessary conflict. But here's where it gets even deeper. Playing dumb does something to you too. It trains your ego to sit down. It teaches you to detach from the need to prove yourself. It builds the kind of inner stillness that doesn't rely on validation. And that, Schopenhauer would argue, is a form of enlightenment. Because the ultimate goal of philosophy isn't just to know more, it's to suffer less. And one of the greatest sources of our suffering is the constant pressure to be seen a certain way. When you no longer need to be seen as brilliant, wise, or impressive, you gain something infinitely more valuable: freedom of action. You can move without friction. You can observe without distortion. You can learn without interruption. And when the time comes to act, You do so with precision because you've been watching, studying, waiting. In a world where everyone is trying to impress each other, the person who quietly gathers truth has all the leverage. So here's the final question. Can you let go of the need to be seen as smart long enough to actually become wise? Can you play dumb not to manipulate, but to understand? Can you allow others to underestimate you not so you can see them clearly? Schopenhauer's genius trick isn't about deception. It's about clarity. It's about using perception as a tool, silence as a strategy, and underestimation as a shield. It's about realizing that in a world loud with performance, the real power lies in stillness, restraint, and the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to be seen to be in control. And that's the final move. You don't need to outsmart the world. You just need to let it think it already has you figured out.